I'm John Hillcoat.
I'm Nick Cave.
We're here in London doing the post-production of our film, The Proposition. I directed the film.
I wrote the screenplay and I'm doing the music to it.
When I was in film school, I got very interested in genre and especially exploring and stretching genre into another context. And at that point, I was thinking of an Australian take on the Western, because there's a lot of similar parallels of a wild frontier conflict, a nation built on extreme conflict and violence, and it had the epic landscape, the outlaws, the indigenous population, all those kinds of ingredients, and that always fascinated me. I was looking for a writer, really, to write this, because I knew it had to be big. I knew it had to involve be a fictitious kind of epic in the sense of taking in the whole broader canvas of Aboriginal conflict, the conflict with the climate, the bushrangers and the British colonial system.
Johnny and I have had a long-standing relationship, 20 years, maybe more, of working together on various things. I'm a musician and he's done a lot of videos for me. In fact, he's the only, in the hundreds of videos I've done, is the only director who does consistently good videos for me and makes the video experience even vaguely bearable. And Johnny basically came to me and asked me to write, asked me first of all, prematurely as it turned out, to do the music for a film that didn't actually exist, which was to be an Australian Western. And I said I'd be happy to do the music for it. Where's the film? And he didn't have it that far down the line. And a kind of couple of years went by, I think, and eventually Johnny asked me to write the film as well, which seemed to me a kind of a terrifying thing to do, to have to sit down and write a film script, because I didn't feel I had much understanding of dialogue. I knew I could work out a story easy enough. I'm basically a narrative kind of songwriter, and telling stories is what I do. But I thought a film script's really about dialogue, and I would have problems with that. But anyway, I sat down and started to do it, and it just felt really good to do it. And I just really enjoyed it and did it in 3 weeks or something like that. I've never actually been to the outback as such. You know, I grew up in the country in Victoria, but it's not the outback. That's, it looks, it looks different. And I left Australia when I was 20, and basically the travelling I did pretty much with my band, and that was being kind of dropped into the cities and playing gigs, and that's kind of all I really knew of Australia. So it was really exciting for me to actually go to see this a tiny part of Australia that I actually knew from first-hand experience nothing about.
What fascinated me in reading the script was that the characters are not delineated in as far as there's good and there's bad. They're all, the good guys are bad and the bad guys are good.
I think, like any great movies, you have to have a wonderful starting point. In this case, it's the script. Nick Cave is a brilliant storyteller. He's a wonderful musician, but in his songs he's a wonderful storyteller. This is the first movie script that he's written, but it's a terrific story. It's beautifully told, it's lyrical, it's poetic, it's dramatic, and that was certainly the thing that attracted me, as I'm sure it did the other cast members.
The script was like just such a kind of rock and roll read, you know. It was by about page 3 or 4 I was thinking, this is really strange and fantastical, and it's very rare that you come across an original screenplay that has such an epic feel to it.
When I first read this script, I read it about a year ago, and it's kind of the first Australian film set in such a, mixed culture area with, as in the Indigenous people and the white settlers, and it's kind of represented the Indigenous people really amazingly well. Like it's not just like people that are being persecuted or people that are, savages or that sort of thing, which, it either goes, either way in most Australian films. And, either, we've got this Indigenous problem, so we need to elevate the status of the Indigenous population, or, we need to show that, they're drunks and laybats and all that sort of thing. And this film kind of represents both problems, and what we did to these people, but also that they're really noble warriors and things, and they weren't just a pushover and all this sort of stuff. So that was the most interesting thing to first read this. And I mean, you try to look for some sort of meaning with a script, and that was like, all right, this is actually saying something that hasn't really been said before, So I guess that's what this script sort of meant to me when I first read it. When I was sort of like Nick Cave, right? When I read the script the first time, it was an ex-girlfriend now. I was at her place, and she had a whole bunch of scripts, and she said, oh, there's this one by Nick Cave. And I go, are you kidding me? No, have a read this. And so I sat there and read the whole thing through in like an hour, and that's pretty rare that you just you read through a whole script and just go, wow, and I'd seen Samuel, and this is like a year and a half ago, I'd seen Samuel there, and I go, God, there's no one else in this country that can play that role like I can play, and so I knew it was mine, sort of thing. And because I'm just obsessed with Nick Cave and have been most of my life, he seems to be the biggest sort of, I don't know, the biggest amazing storyteller in music from Australia. It's a very taste sort of thing, I'm really into that dark world that he creates in your mind, but so to do a film of his is just like unbelievable, and all my music friends are so jealous of me.
And the fact that it was a very interesting script is the thing that first attracted me to it, I think. The fact that it was another take on a genre that's been somewhat neglected for some time, and in a completely different place, different understanding of it as well, and actually a kind of renaissance in a sense, a rebirth of it, rather than a continuation of the same old thing, and a different look at it altogether.
They're Irish brothers, they're survivors. In a sense, to me, they're like kind of animals in a cage that are that have authority to battle against, as well as the elements. Charlie's, he's put in this awful situation of basically having to choose one brother over another one, and they've lived a life of violence. They've lived a life of extreme criminal activity, which is all sort of wrapped up in this whole notion of survival, which is also then wrapped up in this whole notion of family. He's really sort of forced into the heart of darkness. He's really forced to question what's valuable, what's valid, what love and respect and relationships within a sort of family environment mean. So we've kind of caught him in a, during, you know, at the point that we sort of begin the film, we've kind of caught him in a really trapped scenario.
We have this theory that they married for love and that Martha married beneath her, a bit of rough. And it was very, very romantic and exciting, but their sort of, the family punishment was that they got...
Or embarrassment.
A bit of an embarrassment, so they get shipped to the other side of the world.
Stanley came here on a high, thinking that, you know, I can change this place. I can civilise this place, this area, these people. And I will do it. And with, you know, the best will of the world of the British Empire, it's with the fist of iron, you know.
Martha arrives feeling that she is the epitome of civilization. You know, she's a good Christian woman. She's, you know, she's educated, she's sophisticated, and sort of finds herself in this total dark, moral, complex situation where she's ultimately responsible for somebody's death. And it becomes very morally complicated. You know, having been convinced of what one's own kind of moral righteousness, then you know, then they find them, they're the bad guys in a way. It's a big, epic type film with lots of action and guns and horses and blah, and we've got this little kind of crucible of a two-hander in the middle of it, in this sort of Chekhovian house in the middle of the outback.
It's a harsh environment. It's a different time. Violence is a part of his life. He's not just some criminal running around brandishing a gun and killing people haphazardly. He's quite pointed, and he kills with purpose. He's deeply in love with his brother and family, and it stems from his childhood, his past, and he kind of pines for something poetic and beautiful, and it just so happens that in this particular circumstance, he understands how to guard what he loves with a gun or a machete. He has a strong code, internal code, and a strong sense of family. If you're a cop or if you're English, well, then he'll murder you.
I play a character called Janon Lamb, who, in short, is a bounty hunter. He's from the old country. Whether he is exactly what he pretends to be is another thing, or whether he is a personal invention. I rather suspect that he's a personal invention, but he invented himself so long ago that he's almost made it a reality. He's a weasel of a man on one side. On one side of him, he can be charming and he can be amusing. He's certainly well-read. He does enjoy his, or has enjoyed his poetry and his culture and so on. But things have slipped, and he's allowed himself to become little more than a brigand, really. The character was superbly written, marvelously written. In fact, you know you've got a good character when everybody else said, "Oh, what are you playing?" And you'd say, "Janon Lamb," and they'd say, "Oh yeah, that's the part that I wanted to play."
I play Eden Fletcher in The Proposition, and in a nutshell, I suppose Eden's the money and the power of the town within the film. He essentially owns the town. It's a decision that Eden Fletcher makes within the film that certainly makes everything spiral in one particular direction.
He's a very tormented child. He's a victim of circumstance, if you will. He's only 14, and he's quite simple for his age. He hasn't had the benefits of education, and he's a really simple, sweet boy, yet he made a mistake, and that mistake is living in his mind and tormenting him, and it will until the day, you know, he dies.
Samuel Stoat is he's a sociopath, and he's kind of, you know, kind of hope that he'll have two sides, you know, like you'll see this really innocent side that has not been nurtured, and therefore he's become a psychopath through the influence of the wrong people. And I kind of imagined that, you know, something hideous had happened to him when he was a kid, and when he was a very small kid, and he just kind of created this bad seed, you know, and I thought that he might have killed his parents, actually. But he's also very beautiful, you know. I think he's got something that you kind of feel it's a shame that he hasn't been nurtured in this side, because, like, with his singing and he's quite innocent, but then everything just gets turned on its head, basically.
To Bob, well, I really enjoyed this character. I really find that he didn't have to promote himself. I'm here and make an Aboriginal statement. He was in there with his badge. And yeah, a great piece of writing. It's been a long time since Thomas Keneally, but
when the first white men came to Australia and they got all the black fellas, and, you know, some that lock them up, some that take them in bush ranges, some that taught them in a horse, and all that. Some they keep him in work and labor, like in the farms and all that things. So, you know, proposition stories about bush ranges, and this true story about the white people and the black people.
John was very thorough in wanting us to get a sense of the period, as well as, I mean, I find looking at photographs really really important. Even though you know that people are kind of posing for the photographs, what you sort of see underneath I find really interesting as well. I'd have to say I probably wasn't as familiar with it as we all should be, and what I was probably familiar with would be the general perception, I suppose, of that period. The reality of the harshness of what everybody had to experience in that period. You know, the settlers, the convicts, the Aboriginals, is really difficult to get a real sense of. And so doing the research for the film really gave me, you know, a tiny bit more of an idea of what it was really like for people in that time.
We're taught such a small amount of Australian history, yet in actual fact there's millions and millions of years of the Aboriginal people living here, and yet it's something that we don't, you know, learn about. We just learn about the white man coming out and, you know, and finding Australia, whereas there's so much more to it than that. Well, John, the director, is quite amazing when it comes to research. Over the period of about 2 weeks, I'll be receiving a big parcel from John every day, and it accumulated to about, I think, this much paperwork and about 3 VHSs and a DVD. There's this one VHS that John sent me, and at first I was kind of curious as to why he sent it to me, because it was about the Vietnam War. And what happened is, I can't remember the name of the incident, but 500 civilians were slaughtered by American troops for no reason except that they were told to. And the documentary kind of explores what drives otherwise normal people to kill, and how the environment can play a big factor, and how once you've killed, it's then easier to kill again and again and again, and how it clings onto your mind, and how these people are still suffering from what they did.
Was I familiar with this part of Australian history? To a point, yes, and in other areas, no. So it's been a little bit of a learning experience. I've certainly never been to Winton before, and it's a pretty, it's an eye-opening place. You walk through the cemetery here, and back in the 19th century, a huge proportion of the people who died were in their early 20s, and it gives you some idea of exactly what people had to deal with during those times. It's a very harsh, rugged landscape, a lot for people to overcome, and this particular part of Australia has had a very violent and bloody history. So specifically, I wasn't aware of the history, no, but generally I sort of was, yeah.
Do you undertake any research for the role?
Research I did. I read as much as I could, and John gratefully sent through some pages that were relevant to the project and relevant to characters as well. He sent through to me some wonderful material, actually, that was printed at the time regarding manners, which I actually found quite fascinating, and stuff that I, wouldn't have normally come across.
I read some journals of women from the time, and those were amazing, of women living in pretty desperate circumstances who've come from England and arrived and have been told a complete lie.
The difference with America and Australia, I kind of guess, people went to America because they were running away from something. People came to Australia because they were forced to come here. They were sent to the other side of the world. And New Zealand people, when they're in a position like that, don't give a fuck about anything.
I had these things called the Wild Colonial Boys, which were the young, sort of bushrangers at the time, and it's not so hard to imagine, they're like maybe 15, 16-year-old kids who've got nothing to do, and they've been persecuted by the police, the Irish immigrants, persecuted by the police their whole lives, and what have they got to do but, rob and, try and make the most of what they can.
The script is a unique take on Australian history in that it's probably one of the more honest versions of it. There has been a tendency to nary a black face and the various massacres, and some people say Holocaust. That's a big sort of issue that I won't sort of get into now or anything. But in Australian cinema, there has been very little dealing with the darker side of the development of this nation, and I think, given the harshness of the environment and the complete contrast to anything the Europeans had experienced, it was kind of inevitable that when you get two cultures so different, there's going to be a clash. There was not a lot of options for a lot of people, and also young men are young men, and it's adventure, and it was a land where you could disappear into the wilderness and in a way create your own kingdom and, rule of the gun sort of thing. That's what I think this is a great film to make, because, America has had a history of making westerns for years and years and years. And I've always been really stumped by why Australia hasn't made westerns, because it certainly had an equally dramatic past, complete with all the same things, battling Indigenous people, gold rushes, immigrants from all over the world. And weirdly enough, I think, you know, Australia developed into a much more peaceable nation, given that it's come from this, in a way, a much more brutal inception in the convicts are coming over in pain. It's a nation sort of born into pain and inflicting pain on the people here. And, you know, there's a way to go between black and white relationships, certainly, but it's certainly not the gun culture that, say America is, but certainly it has played a part in Australia. And I'm always surprised it hasn't been sort of talked about more. And it sort of informs today too. You know, there's always going to be a relationship between sort of police and criminals in Australia. I think it just sort of seems to be the norm.
It's a story that needed to be told, basically, a portrayal of reality as fiction. And it's good to see that someone's finally had the balls to come out and make a film about how the West was won. And you know, basically educate people that this is basically how it was 100 years ago. It was a wild, old, rough place, and that explains some of the reasons why we have reality as it is today. You know, genocide was practiced in certain areas, and that's a fact of life then. If you were in the wrong place at the wrong time, well, you didn't live very long. In certain areas, people were wiped out. They were hunted out. And that hasn't been recognised by a lot of people. They don't realise that. In other areas, you know, there was some ongoing association, and, you know, it wasn't so bad. It just depends on where you lived and who wanted to live there as well.
The Queensland Native Police have probably the worst reputation in Australian history. They took the tribal people, took them into their enemy territory, and then fed them with booze and money and women and whatever they wanted, and then they sent them out to wreak their revenge on their enemy tribespeople, which was a tactic that was used in a lot of places. In America, again, the American West, they used the native Indian population in that way. I'm very pleased that we explored and exposed the black-on-black violence as well, because that's quite taboo, and there has been this history in Australia of representing the Aboriginals as very just a group of unified, nomadic, peaceful people that were just innocent victims of this force, when in actual fact they were like even more diverse than Europe in terms of all these different cultures, different languages, different groups that were also arch enemies fighting each other like the Europeans were. The local Aboriginal people that were labelled as renegades because they were fighting out in the ranges. There's still pockets of them that refuse to just become part of the town and become indoctrinated by the British system, and they try and fight for their land, and they're out in the ranges, but there's only a small group that remains, and they have attacked the outposts. They've killed this guy, Dan O'Reilly, that we're introduced to early in the film, and as there was this law of reciprocity that Eden Fletcher talks about, which did happen if they had a payback system where if one of their people got killed, they would kill one of the white people. However, unfortunately for them, the English whites didn't adhere to a payback system of tit for tat, because they saw that one of their people was worth 100 or 1,000 of the other people. So it wasn't a one-on-one exchange of tribal law. It was, so hence Eden, in response to Dan O'Reilly, wants Stanley to not accept the death of one of them, but to finish them all. What's interesting about seeing the British Empire taking its cultural superiority and putting it in a place like outback Australia, where suddenly their clothes, their manners, their codes of conduct are so at odds with their environment that it kills them and it fails miserably.
If you're looking for authenticities, there are lots of stories in the country here that white people and black people have worked together for a long time. And that's the way how this country started. A lot of people in the wilderness out here have brought up by Aboriginal milk. They've suckled on Aboriginal milk. And that's how they've survived through here. And amazing how they've changed.
This movie seems to be a little bit closer to how relationships developed and how relationships were at that particular era. I mean, a lot of the Australian films that do have Indigenous extras or actors, their role always seemed to be the same, which is black troopers, Aboriginal people in manacles, and massacre scenes. So they're ones that I'm very familiar with in terms of as a viewing public member, but being part of the part of the whole production gave me a greater understanding in terms of it's not just about the massacres, it's not just about the trackers. It actually, in my eyes, came up one notch, one level by having two Indigenous people as part of the outlaw gang. That's never been done in Australian movies before. Definitely accurate. They're well recorded, and that's nationally anyway. All those events, all the events did occur around that particular era, and prior to that, I think even all the way up to about the 1950s. So there was a lot of accuracy there in terms of, the things that occurred to Aboriginal people. So.
Over here is a what we call a humpy. It's an Australian term for shack, shanty, or basic shelter. There's a whole lot of them we built around the periphery of the town to kind of give it a bit of texture and a bit of colour. Basically, it's where people live. It's poor people's accommodation. Again, that one there, for example, is taken directly off a reference photograph. It's built exactly as a humpy was built in a particular one in the 1880s. They're pretty much authentic to a small settlement like this. The idea of this town is that it's actually just established. It's had a jail put here as an administrative centre, and a small community has sprung up around that to service that and to service the pioneering sheep and cattle farmers, ranchers that were coming in at the time. So yeah, basically how I came up with this set of buildings was trawling through all the research books, reference books that I could find, get my hands on, and selected about 1,000 photos, and from those put together a little composite of each location, the town, the Outback Bar, Stanley's homestead, the mining camp, and so on. So what I've done is based all of these buildings on actual historical buildings. Each one of them can be found pretty much in a very similar form in a reference book.
The themes came out of this. Initially, we sort of had this kind of broad canvas, and we decided that we wanted to do something that was mythical and had some, simple kind of tale that, and what Nick was doing was creating at the very sort of core of it a basic morality tale between, three brothers and a policeman.
Something that really gets me in films is the is the male character trying to do the best he can against all odds. It's something that really gets me. Sorry, right here. You know, and that was something that was important to me to have in there, especially in the role of Stanley, the policeman. Good men in the wrong situation, and the consequence of that, everything spiralling out of control. What I hope the film generates at the end are periods of intense violence followed by periods of sadness and longing, and to me that's something that's reflected in Australia and the Australian outback. Lots of violence and no sex, my kind of film. 2 thumbs up.
I think the film, other than the obvious things that are in the film about the proposition, you know, about a man making a moral mistake, I think, you know, for what he feels is the right reasons, but it's kind of a bit deeper. It's a little bit what human beings make other human beings into, what they turn them into. You know, from the guys that are sent out here who are bandits, the pursuit of them, the poverty of them, you know. But then again, there are people that do terrible acts, and they're driven by other human beings who feel it's their right to take a land from someone else and turn it into their own. And when they're there, oppress the people that are there. So I kind of think that's a subject that's happening today. It's happening in countries all over the world. You know, it's something we never learn, and we get better at. So within this story that's set in the 1870s in Australia, you have this kind of, I wouldn't say modern theme, but it's a theme that's been going on through time immemorial, you know. And we never learn from it, and we never get any better at it, you know. I kind of think that's probably whether that was intentional or not, but that's, for me, kind of what the film is about, in a way, you know. How we view our fellow man, you know. The hypocrisy of it all and the tragedy of it all, you know.
It's about the nature of civilization, really, I think, and who we are, who we try to be, and how wrong we get it. It's very morally complicated, this film, very kind of dark, moral quandary at the middle of it. These people arrive thinking that they are the civilized and the civilizers, and find themselves in a position where actually they're responsible for somebody's death.
The way in which we perceive things and the way in which we identify things in order to stay on track, in order to stay on top of things, in order to feel good or to actually maintain some sort of control is a notion that I find fascinating, and I think if you look at any scene in The Proposition in the film, you'll see that kind of battle going on. And it's expressed so beautifully, obviously, because Nick wrote it. It's a really weird dilemma. It's a really weird sort of dichotomy, because it's such a fine line between nature and control, and nature in itself is trying to take some sort of control. So, I mean, there's a whole. There are other themes as well. The sort of notion of family and what is crime, what is survival. So there's a bunch of things that infiltrate the story that I guess you could sort of tap into. Things that on some level are very simple but also very complex.
Westerns, in a way, are great because they always deal with deep moral dilemmas, and they do so in a wonderful landscape, in a big landscape, and usually they're violent outbursts, and violence is something that is exciting on film. and haunting. There is this sense of spirituality about the piece, where you feel that the sun, the moon, the stars are kind of turning on their axis around this world at this particular period in time, and it's in a way almost religious. They're somewhat doomed, all of them.
People can take different things out of the film. For me, it deals with, well, there's a warped morality within the film. There's sibling rivalry within the film. It's an interesting film for Australia because I don't think we've ever done anything like this before. It's essentially a Western as well. And as far as I can think of, there's no other film that is similar in our cinematic history. It's not a bushranger film that we've done before. It's not a biopic of any of our sort of anti-heroes in our history. It's rather a distinctive period drama with a Western flavour that deals with some pretty bloody incidents.
The film is about death, really. I think probably more than anything, and how it's death and survival. It's to do with the human spirit. It's none of these things that I'm saying, of course, are original, but I think that it's a pretty original way of looking at it. It's also extremely entertaining, I think, in many ways. So, I don't want to make it sound as though it's some sort of deep intellectual exercise. It's certainly not that.
The temperature, the flies, the kind, I suppose one could say it could be hostile, but really it's almost comfortable. The heat is dry and it slows down your moves, and I wear a coat throughout the film, and it's sweaty. The pace is at times so slow that it just stops. But what's wonderful is that there are these outbursts of violence that come out of nowhere, happen quickly, and then everything slows down again, which makes for an exciting pace. And I think it would be very difficult to recreate that pace in a studio. And the sense of place is really very, very important.
One of my main, obsession, there, was really to try to show how hard it is to live there, and how hard it is, and how difficult it is to survive in a way. It's for us, and I think the first days, of course, there, I really suffered from the heat, from the flies, and I think it has always been the case, since years. So I really wanted to increase this aspect, not make the landscape in a way nice and beautiful and friendly, but make the landscape harsher and more violent and more empty, and trying in the cinemascope ratio just to show how one single character was lost there and completely just riding there. Just everything seems so far away, and you can see the horizon so far away. My idea was to make it, more violent, more strange.
When we actually got down to it, and we're in, and because you also knew that you'd be wearing woolen pants and long sort of thick shirts and things, and you're just dreading it. But when we got out there, I think there's something, you know, it kind of happened with everyone. Like, your mind switches on, like, we actually live in this place, and you can't be weird about it when you're actually doing it. So instantly, as soon as you got all that stuff on, you're walking around, it kind of felt all right, you know. Like, I mean, you start to feel a bit mad at times, but the actual heat, like, it's only been when I've been off set that I've gone, oh God, it's really hot today, you know. Like, it's actually been all right.
I went to Dubai before I came here to get used to the climate, you know, to try and acclimatise a little bit. And that's a desert, and that still doesn't get you ready for this place. You know, when it's 45 degrees and it goes up to 52 degrees.
52 degrees.
Yeah, and the cloud goes in, doesn't it? And it drops 10 degrees there and then. But then again, it's helped with the making of the film, in a way, for the characters you're playing, because you are playing that heat. And that dictates the pace of the film for you, you know, and what you're feeling. So you don't even have to feel about acting that. You know, you get on with playing the part you're playing, and the climate kind of takes over and gives you the rest of it. So, in a way, I think it's been quite helpful working in that heat. I know you was...
I've suffered. I mean, I'm in full period costume with corsets and petticoats and layers and layers and layers and layers and layers. And I'm a delicate English flower, and
yeah.
I can't take the heat anyway. So, but actually, you know, sort of been asking, you know, how hot is it today? 40 degrees. Oh, fine. It's 40 degrees. That's nothing. You know,
yeah, this is a nice day.
It's been up to, you know, in the early 50s, when that does feel like you're being cooked from the inside, or you're standing next to a house that's on fire and that you can't get away. But somehow it makes you concentrate in a way.
Before I went, knowing that I was going to be wearing woolen pants and woolen vests and leather coats, and it was going to be 45 degrees, I didn't even really want to think about it, because I wasn't sure how I was going to deal with it. But I think once you're shooting, it actually adds to the experience of that these characters are going through. I mean, it's very odd to me. I understand it, but it is very odd that people would choose to wear those kinds of clothes. But at the same time, if you don't, if you wear shorts and singlets or whatever, you're going to burn to a crisp, you know. So there are practical reasons. But, you know, this whole notion, and this is something that I think, you know, infiltrates the story, this whole kind of fine line between nature and control, you know, this idea that we can maintain a perspective on the world or on our lives, even in the face of nature, even in the face of 48 degrees.
It's not the first time that I made a movie in the desert. I've made a movie in Namibia, and I made a couple of movies in other parts of Africa, Morocco and things. But the outback is quite different, I have to say. It is so vast. I'm not sure that I felt, even when I was in Namibia, that it had the vastness of this. So you feel as though this is a kind of eternity, and I'm quite sure that the original pioneers must have felt that too. It must. When you think that all the rangers were hunted down, it's amazing how they were, because how they were able to follow them, catch them, or whatever. They must have been nearly dead when they did. I've enjoyed working with John as a director immensely, I must say. He knows exactly what he wants. He's on the other hand, he's a good listener. He's gives the kind of notes that I like things like, yes, well, that's going in the right direction. I'd love it to be quicker, and all those sort of things. I mean, I think we felt that we were on the same page from the beginning. So I mean, it didn't need more involved notes, in a sense, in that way. And I'd had the chance to do plenty of work on it, so it was a very happy experience altogether.
There's just no question about what it is that he wants, you know, and about what it is that works for him and doesn't work for him. And I love that. I mean, as an actor, I'm not interested in somebody who's going to pander or who's going to say one thing when they really mean something else, because I can usually see through it anyway, and it makes things very difficult. And John is just very honest and respectful enough to work with you. And if you're struggling with something and you need another take and another take and another take and another take, John will, of course, there's no reason why John would stop that. So, yeah, he was delightful to work with, yeah.
When you give ideas, you didn't feel stupid. You didn't feel like you was imposing what your ideas were on the movie. You felt like you was offering something to make a film with everyone else, which it should be. You know, making films should be that. And they are, you know, to be fair. And John, I can't praise him enough, John. I think he's a wonderful director. Not only visually, he's very visual, he's very artistic in the way he likes to make a work of art. But that's all right. But you've got to have performances as well, and he's got that side of it as well, which is fantastic, because the whole point of it is trying to perfect something that's bang on the money, you know. And you very rarely get to that place, but you've got to try, you've got to have a go at it, and John's got both of them. You know, a lot of people have got one or the other, you know. But John's got both of them, and an absolute privilege to work with, you know.
I think Nick likes dealing with the big issues and big characters and big dramatic sweeps of stories. The characters may at times seem larger than life, but the wonderful thing about John's direction in this project is the fact that at all times it's rooted in a reality. So you believe the story and you believe the situation at all times.
I mean, I think the way he worked with the actors also was, for me, very inspiring, because he's so sweet with everyone. I mean, I think it's a violent story made by a very sweet man, I think, which is something much more interesting, I think. And the way he was talking to the actors, the way he was directing them, very, very sweet and very persuasive, and even to ask them to make something violent and hard on the screen. He was so sweet with them, you know. I think he gave me a lot of inspiration for my work also, even the way I was working with my crew. And I think he's a very, very good example on the set, on the film set.
And it's amazing for the director to work with, let's use this word, non-professional actors from around the bush, and to find the patience, and John had done a magnificent job with working with people like that.
We came in, we saw each other and clicked at a personal level and at a professional level.
I've really enjoyed working on a script which I think is beautifully written, with a great bunch of actors. I mean, really, that's how I derive a lot of joy in my life, is to work on things that I believe are worthy. I find it a little bit difficult to compliment the crew or the actors until the film is finished, because I don't want to jinx anything. And it reminds me of a story that Lauren Bacall told me about my father, where on Treasure of the Sierra Madre he spoke to Humphrey Bogart, and he said, "Bogey, I think we're making something very special here." And Bogart said, "Oh, shut up, John. This is just a Western." And what a great Western it was. And Westerns, in a way, are great because they always deal with deep moral dilemmas, and they do so in a wonderful landscape, in a big landscape.
Danny Houston, who plays Arthur Burns, my rather psychotic elder brother, was an absolute delight. I have to say that everybody in the film was an absolute delight. He's a very worldly guy and a very confident and relaxed guy, and with a wonderful sense of humour. And I imagine, because of being so worldly and having lived in Ireland himself when he was growing up as a kid, and you know, just kind of gives him a really open perspective on things. And you know, obviously being the son of John Huston, we're all rather fascinated to sort of hear about the upbringing of this guy. He could be quite sort of flippant and blasé about things, but really, really sensitive and really intuitive and really respectful as well. I think, you know, the nice thing about the film was, and this kind of rarely happens, but it would be nice if it happened more, John Hillcoat, who obviously directed the film and cast everybody in the film, I think was very, he probably did it accidentally, but he was very keen to involve people who were ready to respect him and respect each other. And so we all had a great sense of camaraderie, I guess, on the film. And
I haven't worked with Emily or Ray before. I met Ray very briefly in Toronto a couple of years ago. It's been a treat, an absolute treat. I'm huge fans of both of their work, so it's been a pleasure and an honour working with both of them. Extremely talented and generous actors. Yeah, a treat. It's been a gift of a project for me. It's, you know, starting with the script, to work on a project that Nick Cave has written is certainly special. Working with John has been wonderful, and the cast, you know, the cast has been absolutely first rate, and it's been truly a pleasure all round. Oh, everybody's here for one particular reason, because they really are passionate about this project. You know, every time a film gets financed, it's a gift. It's a miracle, a small little miracle, and it should be a pleasure for everybody to work on, and it has been in this particular case. It's everybody. You know, the conditions haven't been, you know, completely easy, but it hasn't fazed anybody. Everybody's really dug in and done exactly what they've done and what they needed to do, and given 100% all the time.
Well, working with the actors on this film has been, just to start off with, the most unbelievable experience of my life. And when I found out, you know, just the initial people they were talking about were very exciting, but then towards getting closer to production, it was getting, like, unbelievably exciting, you know, with Ray Winston and John Hurt and, like, all these people that I just couldn't believe that it was actually going to happen, you know, people that I'd never in my wildest dreams imagined working with, you know.
At first, when I found out I got the part, I got quite intimidated, and I thought, oh God, how am I going to be able to act with these amazing actors? I was quite scared, but once you rock up and you work with them, they just give you so much, and I think I've done some of my best work on this film, you know, because of the people that I'm working with.
I've worked with some really good people. My first scenes were with Guy Pearce, who's a fabulous actor. Got Danny Houston, you know. Got some young Australian actors out here. There's one, you know, young Tom and Richard, you know, like creating atmospheres for scenes, you know. The scene where he gets whipped, young Richard. And just the noise of what he was making was bang on the money, and you didn't have to do anything else because he was doing it for you, you know. And that's where you get the vibe, and you look at a crew all standing around, holding the lamps and all that, and they're like that. They're the boys that go to pictures, they're the boys who watch films being made all the time. Not us, being arty, you know, and going, what did you think of that? Was that a marvellous scene? And, you know, it's the boy with strides sort of over his arse, hanging on to the light, you know, who sees the films. There's no bullshit with them, you know, they know. And you get that vibe on this film. And I hope I'm not talking it up too big and, you know, and putting the mockers on it, but I'm that confident about the film that it's a special film, you know.
What was so fantastic about Winton was that firstly, you had the locations that we'd been looking for, which were these extraordinary landscapes, these kind of huge open nothingnesses, over which you had these incredibly vivid and sort of apocalyptic sunsets and sunrises, which are quite extraordinary. But on top of that, suddenly out of nowhere, we also found this extraordinary rock formation, which formed the basis for Arthur's camp, with these huge, vast boulders which were sort of lying on top of each other, which just was in the middle of nowhere. But on top of that, having seen it and wrecked it, we thought, well, we'll never be able to get the crew down there. But then we found this wonderful little path down the outside, so we could even take the horses down. So, so that, and then on top of that, there was another area for the Outback Bar, which is, once again, these huge boulders, but in this kind of desolate area. So we found all these things, and more, as they say, in this one area. But the beauty of the whole thing was that nothing was more than half an hour's drive from town, believe it or not, because when you see the picture, it looks as though, you know, one's gone on safari to sort of, you know, the depths of Australia. I suppose, yes, we are in what they call the Central West, but at the same time, half an hour from here, you can get, you know, clean sheets and a cold beer, which, let's face it, for a film crew is pretty important.
It's very hot.
Is that it? My first impression, well, I didn't really know what to expect because I was told I was going to have to rough it out here, which would, you know, I think when you make a film in England, you rough it anyway, you know, got the time and all that sort of stuff. So I didn't really know what I was going to encounter. I thought I was coming out to the barrenness of the outback and a tin shack, tin bath, and eating kangaroo meat, you know, and loads of spiders and scorpions and things like that. And turning up at the Border Opal was like looking at the Savoy, you know. And we were lucky enough to have a really good chef there, weren't we?
Croatian Miroslav,
Yeah.
who makes a different meal every night.
Yeah,
Lobster.
and you can have what you like. And as for roughing it, that didn't really apply, you know. I don't think I've ever been anywhere in the world like this. I'm really glad I came to this place before I went to Sydney or anywhere like that, because I kind of believe this is probably the real Australia, you know.
Well, I expected Winton to be considerably rougher. I expected Winton to be, you know, a lot of pommy bastards coming in here and all that sort of stuff. And I just found it incredibly friendly. We'd stayed at the Boulder Opal Motel, which was fantastically good food, and completely charming.
Like filming in any small places, communities really relish the opportunities for films to come in and then become part of the filmmaking experience, and that certainly happened with this community. The communities embraced the whole film in a terrific way, and the locals have become part of it. Some of them are in the film, a lot of them are working in different departments on the film, you know, the wardrobe, they've lent their needlework to the film. It's a terrific experience all around.
Just genuine people, and you know, you walk down the street and you say hello to someone, and it's not, you know, a scared look or a scared hello. It's a genuine, you know, how you going? You know, like a really exciting group of people around here, an open-minded group of people as well. And I've just loved the space. You know, it's amazing to have space in your life like this.
This town has only got 750 people in it, and you bring 180 people into a town with only 750 people, and it can be a recipe for absolute disaster. But what we've found is that the people have been so excited by the film. A lot of them worked on the picture as extras, as people on unit, all kinds of jobs. But everybody, right the way from, you know, from the publicans to the hotel managers, to the people in the stores, you know, have all become, they welcomed us into their community, and we've become part of the community.
Yeah, great time. A lot of beautiful things happen. Even this whole town. This project had brought a lot of people together. Some places in Australia, Aborigines and whitefellas don't mix together as much, but when you get a film crew that comes in, well, we've changed this town around, and that's a big bonus for us.
The Aboriginal community here, and they were fantastic. They've been real allies, and the research and getting that right in the script, they were fantastic in terms of a bouncing board and helping clarify issues for us, and talking to the cast, and actually clearing these very, very sensitive locations.
We have an Indigenous land usage agreement, and the claimant party, native title claimant party, has rights to inspect ground before certain actions are done on it to make sure that there's no artefacts or significant sites. Basically, it's respecting their right. As a miner, I have rights. As the film producers and the landowners, they have rights. And we've just all got to learn to live together. And this is a new process where, you know, say we were to go and film over here, well, it just needs to be inspected to make sure we're not damaging anything for the future. Any significant discoveries are recorded, and hopefully down the track someone gets to study them, an anthropologist or something, and it's just basically recognising that people were here before us.
There are times when I felt I was being a little bit too harsh by reducing the set to a very small radius, but that did not disturb anyone. That did not, like, everybody just got in. They still worked within the confined area. I find that absolutely marvellous that they could do such a thing. And I'm talking about a 10-metre radius in some areas, in high-density areas of cultural heritage. And that was on the very first week of filming, and when I seen that, I knew then how serious the film company was. And I knew that there'd be no breaches in terms of the agreement or in terms of the Cultural Heritage Act.
You know, those little things that really is important in an Aboriginal community was taken note of. And it's great that you have people now respecting our world. You know what I mean? That's a big issue in this country.
That's what I like.
Okay, nice and quiet, thanks, block in. Okay. All right, and action.
There's a baby. That's a baby, yeah. Oh, even the dogs like me. Would you credit it?
No, it's oh yes, it'll be. We'll only see the blood spreading once he's sitting down. Position? Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You won't know anything's undergoing.
That's right. And then the next time, the next blood is when he's shot through the head. You don't actually. We're going to be framing the shot so that we're on Guy, holding the gun onto Danny's head, and then he just goes like that, fires out of frame. Yeah. And of course we hear this kind of crack sound, and we cut to Jelen with a bullet wound, still actually working on that. Maybe there is going to be the bullet wound, and then blood just spreading on the ground.
You have to be quick, because otherwise it doesn't register. You haven't got time to wait for it.
Sorry? Well, a couple of seconds, yeah. Split the difference, right?
Death for life.
Hang on.
John,
yeah.
with your little pack on the back.
We don't see.
I thought maybe we could do your EPK interview now.
So, here we are in the center of proposition. Everything's going smoothly. It's the first time I've been relatively quiet for the whole film. So, yeah. Thank you. I must get back to work.
Okay, so I've been wild. Yes, let's get on that. Yes, okay. Okay, good warriors.
Okay.
49 Echo, take 2, A mark over.
Action. you could,
I'll guide you down to it.
in fact, it's better, yeah, if you kind of, if it's a weirder exit, the better, rather than just rolling right around.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
There's
you good?
good,
Are you good guy? Sort of angle, yeah?
Left hand a bit
Somebody
higher.
recording
Yes, very
this, please? Darren?
Yes, I'm recording it. No, is Rowie, you doing that, aren't you? We are doing it though, are we?
Yeah, recording.
Turn over. Rolling.
Speed.
49 down for take 1A mark only.
Action. Cut. Save.
Nice.
Good cut, thank you.
Okay. Just
Okay, very good. Okay, and what's up? Everybody shooting, turn over.
Speed.
2 for par, take 1A mark.
Tom.
Mark.
Mark.
Yeah.
And action.
You all right, monkey? You're strong.
There's, I mean, there'll be just some chairs overturned. So it'll be like a crawl through. Yeah. Basically, I mean, we're going to seal this off.
I guess it's just then whether you think like it's this side, if we're up against the wall and I'm firing out like this, or whether I kind of lob right under the window, we kind of lob right next to it here and have this moment.
So put it like this and
Yeah, I actually think the way I'm recommending it is that you'd be sort of half down, and you'd actually lean your back against there, because the safest place is against these thicker posts and to keep low. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm sorry, there's stuff all over.
No, that's it. So I'd come in, get into this position here.
Exactly.
Ready to fire
Yeah,
out.
exactly. And then actually spring up for some fire. Yeah, straight out the window.
So that the
But
moment down here we can we both kind of get down to this kind of thing. Where have you been here?
Ladies and gentlemen, that was John Hurt's last scene in The Proposition.
Contrary to what you may think, I've enjoyed every single second of it. I thank you all enormously. Hope you don't frizzle like moths in a flame. However, no, seriously, I just wish you all the very best for the rest of the film. Thanks very, very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Don't play with this, naughty Jack. Mm-hmm. It's like, no, I'm not having mine. More. I'm not having any more. They give me a headache.
Neil, go away, please. Alongside the camera.
Okay.
Which will be intercut with young fella up there.
Okay, let's go.
And action! Hey, good people. Before you stand, the finest, most bloodthirsty villains this country has ever seen. Before the year is out, this man will hang. Today, he will be flogged. A message to all who would dare to transgress the laws of this land. Okay, standing by.
Yeah. Wide open.
Wide open, 1-9.
Wide open. 72 Foxtrot, take 1A mark. Wide open.
Wide open.
And okay.
Before action, please, sir.
And action. 18. 19. 20. 21.
'Cause we've got it, it's just bitsy. We just need to get it.
Evening. Good evening.
We're looking to shoot one more shot.
Enjoy the flogging.
We should be finishing at
91, take 3A mark.
No, no numbers. All right. Action.
Sure is pretty.
What's a misanthrope? Some bugger who fucking hates every other bugger.
Hey, I didn't ask you, you black bastard.
He's right, sir. Misanthrope is one who hates you.
Is that what we are? Misanthrope?
No, no. We're a family.
Okay. Turn over.
69 Foxtrot, take 1A mark. 47.
And action. Bit lower, Ian. Squeeze yours harder, Pee-wee. There you go. And, okay, cut. Forward. And action.
Oh.
Bit more on off. Cut.
Kidding, aren't you?
Thank you.
That's a broad one.
Yeah. That's going to go on certain websites.
Here's my urine
Certain
bottle.
websites.
Thank you.
Cheers. Cheers, Gary.
Yeah, I feel so much better after that.
Can we take this? No worries.
good patch on this side here. Is it? Look at that.
So how are the flies?
Flies are terrible. But they're good. They're good. No, not today.
Not today, yeah. All your hands looking pretty good too. It's just that you go up to that much.
You walk past and cut them off.
Going up? Go up. Go to 3. That's it, yep.
You'll probably get some good ones when I take this net off.
Spray.
Okay, camera left. So we're looking for everyone to keep going. Side travel, but everyone
It's funny because you know, I don't much of a surrounding, so it's like straps, stirrups, thinking like relaxed.
Darren, would you like to slip down there? That'd be better, wouldn't it?
And then totally trying to scar that ball just like throw it, you know,
Right, mate.
throw it all the way across the road. That's right. It's fun.
Hey, Dad, we should have that.
So can we, it's just close.
Right here.
Be lower.
Yeah. It'd be nice, so you have the horizon and the...
Yeah.
Let's put the camera here.
Okay, now should we get some guys lighting Stanley's?
Yes, you need to know exactly what to do.
Oh God, look at this cable dragging in the mud. 67.
If this camera on the phone, could you have a word with her about her taking with
Heard on the radio the car was following the tape.
Okay, great. I'm moving on. Coming off. You get who's going with you, Brett? Who's going up with Brett inside?
It's a village idiot.
The village call, they want their idiot back.
You the village idiot? You're not. Must be me then.
Oh, sorry.
It's all gone pear-shaped. It has indeed.
Well, yeah, but...
Yeah, I've just found it. It's a booty. Cheers, kid.
Morning, Ray.
Morning, darling.
Beautiful day.
Yep.
You know that scene where you sit down?
Yeah.
In the mud.
Yeah, in the mud. I can't roll about a bit. Hello, unlucky. I never thought I'd ever see my name.
I'll be on.
I like that too. Bunny pelts. It helps.
Wenham approaches.